Okay, folks, we're finishing up with judges today. I'm going to do this pretty quickly because I know that you guys can all read, and you also have the textbooks. These PowerPoints, as you know, are kind of lectures over material that is in the textbook. I would have done these in class if we were in person, but I'm providing them so that you have um, screenshots or at least a video that you can pause and see some of the materials that I think are important from the textbooks. Finishing up with judges, let's just look really quickly. The same way that there are commonalities among systems that choose judges, there are commonalities among judges. The vast majority are lawyers. Law school costs money, and the best law schools cost the most money. So there is some social and economic status that is consistent across the bench. Race and gender historically, almost for most of American history, the judges have been men, white men for that matter. The Supreme Court was entirely white until 1967. When Thurgood Marshall was appointed. It was entirely male until 1981 when Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed. The Supreme Court currently has 3 women, 1 African American. There's much more diversity now than there used to be. Even though it's improving, white men continue to hold judgeships well beyond their proportion of the general population. A lot of reasons for this. Gender disparities have historically meant that more women didn't go into law school. That's changing. In fact, now I think the majority of law students are female. Most judges come to the bench from private practice. Anyway, I'm reading, so I'm going to stop. One thing people ask me sometimes is, has any president ever become a justice? William Howard Taft became Chief Justice after he was president. Question, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You go from being the chief executive to being the chief justice of the Supreme Court. There's a fair amount of conflict there, potentially. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because, as I said, you can be reading in the book. Why does it matter what sorts of lives people have had before they became judges? Because, of course, we bring our perspectives with us to the bench, to anywhere. But certainly judges bring their perspectives. So, for example, was a judge formerly a prosecutor? Was a judge formerly a defense attorney? Would that matter when they are being asked to rule on various things like the admissibility of evidence, or when they're asked to choose between sentencing guidelines? The textbook contains an example of a case in which a young woman was searched for drugs, a young girl, 13 years old. And that case presented to most of the men on the Supreme Court one perspective, but the fact that there were women, Justice Ginsburg in particular, on the Supreme Court, changed the way that the Supreme Court looked at the effect that might have on a 13-year-old girl. So anyways, as a conclusion, you can read this on your own time. Let's keep on rolling. Most judges are generalists, meaning that they hear a wide array of cases. Sometimes they're specialists in domestic relations or taxation or housing. You gotta have a wide array of skills as a judge. You've got to be a very, very smart legal mind, obviously, but then you've also got to manage a courtroom. You've got to manage a jury. You've got to treat a jury with a certain level of care. You have to treat the parties. If you're in a criminal court system, you have to remember that the accused is presumed innocent until convicted. There's all kinds of things that a judge has to do, different than what attorneys do. In fact, there are special kind of training programs for judges, obviously. If you're an appellate judge, it's slightly different because obviously you don't have to deal with a jury, and you're not dealing with parties. You're dealing with a record, and you're dealing with a different kind of attorney. There are training programs for judges, but oftentimes judges learn on the job or by watching when they're in court. I think that's a good thing. There's a great deal of stress that goes into being a judge. You are passing judgment on people, and we've already talked about how being a judge is not necessarily the most lucrative position you could be. What's the upside? Well, you have some freedom, although that's got some restrictions. there's prestige. You are treated with deference by attorneys. You have power. You have the power to oversee a case and to make rulings that the parties have to abide by. You don't deal with clients. You don't have to worry about billing your time, which is something that many attorneys have to do. So there's a lot of upside, and that's why most judges tend to stay on the job, and many, when they retire, keep working for free. How do you assess the quality? Well, it's not that easy. You can look at, did they make the right rulings? Have they been overturned on appeal? Have their rulings been overturned on appeal? Do they have the right judicial temperament? I don't know if any of you watched some of the trial that took place earlier, I guess late last year, involving the shooter, the person who shot people during a riot in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I'm not going to get into the details of that case, but I will say that there were a lot of comments made about the temperament of the judge in that case, who was kind of an old school judge who did a fair amount of yelling and did a fair amount of kind of informal, almost folksy, almost colloquial commentary from the bench. Did he maintain composure? I guess that's to be determined by the people who were in his courtroom. The key for a judge is to not only be unbiased, but to avoid any impression of bias. Even the appearance of bias by a judge is bad and can be grounds for the judge being removed or the judge being removed from that case. Judges have to manage their conflicts very, very carefully. Do they know the parties? Do they have stock holdings? Do they have things that might be reasonably seen as raising doubts about their about their propriety and about their impartiality? How do you get rid of a bad judge? Well, some places allow you to deny them re-election or to impeach them. Impeaching somebody is very hard usually. You've got to get usually more than just a majority vote to impeach a judge and remove them from the bench. Sometimes judges will voluntarily retire if they are concerned about how it would look if they got impeached. And then there's something called the Judicial Conduct Commissions, which you'll see in your books, that talk about ways to screen complaints for judges, to investigate the judges, and to make recommendations to the state Supreme Courts, which are the bodies that regulate the judiciary among the state judges. More often than not, the mildest sanction is a communication to the judge in private that they have to change the way that they behave. You can improve judges while they're on the bench through training programs, obviously. So that is the end of our judges slideshow. So I'm going to stop this here. We have one more slideshow on appeals, but I'll try to take care of that one fairly quickly, and we will then be done with Module 2 and with American courts. Thanks.